what's up, and ho ho ho. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt, and this is a very special Christmas episode. This is the highly requested second year of my first predictions of next year. This is going to be a very long video today talking about all of the movies which I see right now up ahead that could be nominated for next year. But before we launch into what's coming next year, let's just see how I did in this video last year. You can see my first top 10 here. It's a bit of a mess. I got stuff like Blitz, Megalopolis, Kinds of Kindness, Joker. Michael didn't even come out this year. Like, this is a messy, messy top 10. But there are 3 of them that were correct. Now, I was really cocky last year. I said I believed that I would have 5 or 6 out of 10 correct. That was not the case. There's only 3 that I still think are getting nominated for Best Picture. So that's Sing Sing, Dune Part 2, and Nickel Boys. But it is also worth noting that I did have Anora sitting at number 12. So that was a pretty good call. I had Wicked at number 18, and I had Conclave at number 24, which, thinking about it, Conclave should have been higher than it was. So that's 6 films that on last year's list are still getting nominated right now. So that's not too bad. It's not the top 10, but, you know, in the top 25, 6, it's not terrible. At that time, I didn't know that Emilia Perez or The Substance existed. I also thought that A Complete Unknown would not release on time for this year, so I didn't include it in the list. And I really should have included A Real Pain in The Brutalist, but I skipped over them. I didn't think A Real Pain would be a big thing out of Sundance, and The Brutalist, I just had bias against Brady Corbett because I didn't like Fox Lux, so I didn't include it in the list. So this year, my goal is not to do that. This year, I want to get everything that I possibly can. So buckle up, strap in. This is going to be a very long video today. We're going to be turning over every single stone. If a movie is not on this list, it's because I simply do not know it exists. Nothing will be ignored here. So if I see any Oscar prospects whatsoever, even just visual effects, it's gonna be on the list. All right, now, my first Best Picture winner prediction of 2025 is going to be Marty Supreme, directed by Josh Safdie, coming out Christmas Day next year. So one day from today, as of recording this from A24. This is a semi-biopic of Marty Reisman. He wrote an autobiography titled The Money Player, Confessions of America's Greatest Table Tennis Hustler. He started playing ping pong when he was about 12 years old, becoming a hustler, taking down people at bars and nightclubs, playing for money. And later he ended up being the opening act for the Harlem Globetrotters. And that sounds like a really interesting premise for a movie, especially because it sounds like what Josh Safdie's doing is taking this guy's pretty ordinary but still extraordinary life, and he's making it even larger. Something that really, really drew my attention with Marty Supreme is that this has A24's highest budget ever. This was a $70 million movie about ping pong. They spent more on this movie than they spent on Civil War. They spent double what they spent on Everything Everywhere All at Once on this movie, and it's about ping pong. I've heard some people with insider information even describe it as being a little bit similar to The Wolf of Wall Street. There's apparently a lot of stunts in this. Timothée Chalamet was saying that these had pretty crazy stunts and that he felt like Josh Safdie was testing him and pushing him harder and harder. So here there's just a perfect storm of a really unusual, interesting story, a unique treatment, something that takes this and does it in a really strange way that we haven't seen before. It's got a great release date and a director who's really on the come up. Something I always look for is filmmakers who their last film was really big but didn't really hit with awards for one reason or another. I usually will look to their next film and think, could that be their breakthrough moment? Now that they've had like one film do really well but not that well, could this be the film that does it? So I'm really looking at the Safdie brothers this year. And, you know, there's just a really weird, exciting ensemble cast for this. Not only is there Timothée Chalamet, we've got Gwyneth Paltrow, we've got Tyler, the Creator, we've got Fran Drescher, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful is in this. It's just a ridiculous cast, drawing from everywhere. It sounds fascinating, and that's why it is my early pick to win Best Picture next year. So let's move on to the second place in the top 10. And right now, I'm going with The Roses, directed by Jay Roach. It's the film that I'm looking at most from Searchlight and thinking, this sounds like something that could be a really big player. Not only has Jay Roach been sort of on the rise, doing more serious films, he had Trumbo, he had Bombshell, he seems like he's working his way more and more towards being that serious filmmaker, being that Adam McKay who makes goofy films still, but they get some Oscar attention. The Roses is the one that I think could actually break through for him, could be his moment like The Big Short. The Roses is a remake of the classic Danny DeVito film, which is all about a couple's marriage falling apart. It's about this very wealthy couple, and when the husband loses his job, the wife divorces him because their marriage is entirely built on wealth, on material possessions. And in the ensuing divorce, a very ferocious battle ensues over their material possessions. And eventually it leads to a battle to the death. It's a very dark comedy. It's got a very strong cast. Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman are playing the married couple. What's really interesting me, though, and what's really making me think this is more than just a comedy, is the fact that Tony McNamara wrote the script for this. Tony McNamara, who did The Favorite, who did Poor Things, he is the one writing this. And also Florian Hofmeister, the cinematographer of Tar, is behind the camera. That's really fascinating to me. A great dark premise with a great cast, with a great writer and a great cinematographer, and it's coming from Searchlight. All of that is adding up to me as saying this feels like something really special. We always need some comedies that hit Best Picture. It's also a remake of an incredibly successful film. I haven't seen The War of the Roses that this is based on, but it made $160 million in the box office when it was released in the late 80s. And yeah, I mean, Jay Roach, he's hot off of Trumbo, he's hot off of Bombshell. This is another one of those where I'm looking at, he hasn't quite made it yet, but he's going to at some point. And why not for The Roses? So after that, I'm going with After the Hunt from Luca Guadagnino as my number 3. This is coming from Amazon MGM, and Amazon's really supporting a lot of Luca's stuff. They supported Challengers, they supported Suspiria, they supported Bones and All. They did not support Queer, which should have been an early warning to us that Queer was not real. And After the Hunt is one that I've been hearing about for quite some time because the script has been circulating on the internet. I have not read it yet, but I've heard from all accounts that it is one of the best scripts that Luca has ever worked with. This film follows a Yale professor who learns that her star pupil has leveled a rape accusation against another professor at the school, another professor who happens to be her closest friend. So this professor's put in a very tricky situation. Does she stand with her friend or does she stand with her student? There's a return narrative for Julia Roberts, and from what I've heard, this is a role that could win her another Academy Award. It also has a supporting cast that has a ton of potential, including Ayo Edebiri playing the star pupil and Andrew Garfield playing the professor who is accused. I could actually see all of those performers go on to get Oscar nominations or even wins. Actually, currently, I would be predicting Julia Roberts and Ayo Edebiri to win Academy Awards for this film. That screenplay is getting such amazing reviews from people. I've just heard nothing but good things about this, and it really feels like this is more real than Challengers, than Queer ever were. So the next film on the list is Michael. This is the Antoine Fuqua directed biopic about Michael Jackson, and I'm just gonna say right now, Y'all, like, we're not doing the complete unknown doubting again next year. We are not doing that. If there is a music biopic that's releasing at the right time, that has the right cast, the right crew, and if it's going to make money, which Michael currently, there's studio internal memos that have been saying that they expect it to make $1 to $2 billion worldwide. No, Anton Fuqua has not been consistent over the years, but the team around him is incredibly strong. It's the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody. It's the writer of Hugo, The Aviator, Gladiator. John Logan is the one who wrote this film. Dion Beebe is the cinematographer who did Memoirs of a Geisha. It stars Michael Jackson's nephew, Jafar Jackson. What better narrative is there than the actual nephew of Michael Jackson playing Michael Jackson? This could get terrible reviews. All it needs is good box office. This is Bohemian Rhapsody 2. It's happening. And I don't want to see denial. I don't want to see people be like, oh, my favorite's not going to get in because of Michael Jackson. No, Michael Jackson's getting in no matter what. You guys can cope, but like it's happening whether you like it or not. Jafar Jackson, he's getting a nomination. Coleman Domingo is in win contention for this for playing Michael Jackson's father. This is likely winning editing and sound. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This movie it's just happening. Does not need to be good. One other thing, though, that could hurt it is there's a lot of music biopics coming this year, and if this isn't great, maybe it won't happen. But again, it's Michael Jackson. Next up is Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which he's doing with Netflix. This is apparently a more book-accurate version of Frankenstein. There's no green monster, there's no Boris Karloff grunting and groaning. If we expect it to be book-accurate, Jacob Elordi is going to have lines. He's going to be an actually fleshed-out character. From the production photos that we've seen so far, this has ridiculously lavish sets and costumes. Production design is going to be absolutely magnificent, as we've come to expect from Guillermo del Toro's work. It's apparently largely inspired by the Frank Darabont script, which del Toro has called Perfect. And that script was adapted by Kenneth Branagh for his film Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1994, but was pretty butchered, and Frank Darabont has wanted to take his name off of that project because he doesn't feel like it was true to what he did with that script. And this has been a long gestating project for del Toro. How many of these do we have for del Toro? Films where he's like, I've wanted to make this for 30 years. But yeah, he's said that he wants to make the definitive Frankenstein. He wants this to be his masterpiece. And it's a film that took so long to make because he was scared of fucking it up. He said that it was a dream project that he just genuinely kept putting off because he needs it to be everything he possibly can. This also had a 9-month shoot, so you can tell they were being incredibly meticulous with it. They were really making sure that everything was perfect. This just sounds magnificent to me. Outside of Kenneth Branagh's version, we've never really seen a truly book-accurate version of Frankenstein on screen, and so I think it's going to really change the perception of the character for a lot of people. And the cinematographer, Dan Laustsen, he is really due for some Academy Awards love. I mean, after The Shape of Water, but more specifically, recently he had the double whammy year of John Wick Chapter 4 and The Color Purple, neither of which got him a nomination, but both which were absolutely exceptional work. So I could see possibly a reason to want to award Dan Laustsen for this. So Frankenstein is one that not only am I really looking forward to it as a big Del Toro head, but I feel like the Academy is ready for this. I feel like this is not something that would scare them away anymore. It's a gothic romance from one of the auteurs that they seem to love the most right now. I mean, Nightmare Alley got in just on Del Toro's name alone. The next one on the list is Wicked for Good. I never expected to be putting Wicked 2 in my Best Picture lineup, but with the way things are looking right now, you gotta. This is Act 2 of the musical. Glinda and Elphaba in this act take on their new identities as the Good Witch of the North and the Wicked Witch of the East. And it's all about Elphaba fighting against the wizard. And we get a lot more Wizard of Oz references in here. The Tin Man makes an appearance. The Scarecrow makes an appearance. We see all of that come together. All of these dominoes that have been set up in the first half of the movie are going to fall here. It is interesting, though, because Act 2 is much less meaty than Act 1. They do have to write new material in order to fill a movie, so there are new songs being added to this one. But overall, there's no reason to doubt this. After Wicked Part 1 has been so big, there's no chance that Wicked for Good is just going to disappear. This is happening. It's also got a better role for Cynthia Erivo. Elphaba has a lot more to do in the second act. She has a lot more power, a lot more agency, and so I feel like we could see Cynthia Erivo be in win contention for this one. As well, Jonathan Bailey has a lot more going on with Fiyero, so we could see him end up in the conversation for a nomination on this one. And of course, all those texts are still coming along. Is it going to win costumes and production design again? Probably not. They're not going to repeat the same thing that they're doing, almost certainly doing this year. But there is more stuff in it that they could award. Makeup is another award that they could give it on this one, because there's more things going on. There is the Tin Man, there's the Scarecrow, there's the Lion. If they don't go fully CG with those characters, they keep it kind of more in line with what the Wizard of Oz did, then that's an easy win that they could score for this. So to me, this one just looks really, really big. I have no reason to doubt it after Wicked did so well this year. At number 7, I have Bugonia. This is the new Yorgos Lanthimos film coming from Focus Features in November. This is a remake of the Korean film Save the Green Planet, which follows two conspiracy-obsessed weirdos who kidnap a CEO convinced that they are an alien who is planning to take over and take down the world. In this version, Jesse Plemons and Stavros Halkias are the two conspiracy-obsessed men, and Emma Stone plays the CEO who is kidnapped. And honestly, Yorgos, he's on his hot streak. I don't include Kinds of Kindness because he wrote Kinds of Kindness, but the hot streak is films that he doesn't write. The Favorite was Tony McNamara. Poor Things was Tony McNamara. And this is Will Tracy, who was one of the writers on Succession and who did The Menu. And Yorgos specifically picked Will Tracy as the writer for this remake of Save the Green Planet. And apparently this is super twisted, very violent, but incredibly funny and unique. It's a cult classic for a reason. And of course, there's some relevancy here with the anti-CEO, the CEO being an alien plot. There's some relevancy here that could push through to the next year. And of course, Emma Stone is giving a really committed performance, as she always does, but apparently she has completely shaved her head for this, which is wild. And I can't wait to see what she does in this role. But this is like the majority of the Poor Things team is coming back for this. We've got Robbie Ryan on the cinematography. We've got Jerskin Hendricks on the score. Same editor. Everything to me is saying this is not Kinds of Kindness. This is a more accessible film. This is something that's going to be more funny, more easy to swallow for general audiences. I don't think Yorgos' streak broke because of Kinds of Kindness, which really never was going to be an Oscar movie, and I frankly should have known that last year during this video. So at number 8, I have Avatar: Fire and Ash. This is James Cameron's new movie. It's the third film in the Avatar franchise. And look, y'all have no reason to doubt Avatar. You don't doubt James Cameron. How many times does James Cameron have to prove he is not to be doubted? And in this one, Fire Nation attacks. This is moving us to more areas of Pandora. We're seeing more types of Na'vi. We've seen the forest, we've seen the water, and now we're seeing the air, we're seeing the sky, we're seeing the fire. This is going to be, obviously, a massive audience hit. It's obviously going to be one of the biggest movies, if not, again, the biggest movie of the year. And it's going to be interesting as well because the Na'vi are going to be the enemies in this one as well. So we don't have that same plot being recycled of the general being the bad guy in the end here. Instead, it's going to be much more about this very bitter, this very imperialist version of the Na'vi that are conquering and conquering and conquering. Cameron was quoted as saying that the big creative advance in Fire and Ash is just going going to be that there's greater character depth. We're seeing new cultures, new creatures, all the same stuff that you'd expect from an Avatar movie, but the whole idea of this cycle of films is to live with these people and go on this epic journey with them. So it's not about we're going to show you the best water VFX ever done, but you also get more into the heart and the soul of the characters. So I'm excited that, yes, we're seeing more of this world, but also that they're taking it seriously to develop the characters a little bit deeper. The question is, will this get just what The Way of Water had, or is there a chance that this could get a little bit more? And another question that I have is the fact that there are so many other box office hits that are going to be in the Best Picture category. Will those other box office hits take up a little bit too much space? Being up against Michael, being up against Wicked, could those stifle this at all? And the other question to always ask is just, can every Avatar movie get Best Picture? Or at some point, is Avatar going to stumble? Is one of these 5 films not going to make it into this category? But at this point, I have no reason to doubt. If the movies keep making crazy boatloads of money, if audiences keep liking them, they keep going, if critics keep liking them, there's nothing that says that we need to ditch Avatar yet. Although some people will ultimately try to, because for some reason, a lot of people on the internet don't like Avatar. Y'all are weird. Avatar's great. This is a fantastic franchise, and I am rooting for it. So at number 9, we have Judy, directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu. This is coming from Warner Brothers, and this is the first one on my list where I will say this might not release this year. In last year's video, I might have even included this at the very end as like a, if this releases, it's a thing, but I don't think it will release. I don't think this will release, but if it does, it feels like the best chance that we have at a Warner Brothers Best Picture nominee. This is starring Tom Cruise, and it tells the story of the most powerful man in the world who tries to prove that he's humanity's savior, all while waiting for the impending disaster that he has unleashed, which will destroy the world. So it sounds interesting. It sounds unique. It's a big apocalyptic disaster movie with Tom Cruise playing this like immensely powerful rich person. Also, the writing team on this includes 3 out of 4 of the writers on Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. So it's a really great team coming back for this, which is very exciting because I would love to see Iñárritu do something very similar to Birdman again. So hopefully with this being a comedy, with this having those writers, this could really be on the right track. As well, Emmanuel Lubezki is back to shoot this one, so like it's going to look pristine. It's going to look phenomenal. It's got a great premise. This premise to me sounds a little bit like The End meets Don't Look Up. While people might not like either of those films, both have really good premises, regardless of what you think about the actual films. Also, there's a narrative here with Cruise shifting to more serious acting, shifting to more serious roles now that Mission Impossible is finished. And another stat here is every single Iñárritu movie, even Bardo, every single film he's ever made has had at least 1 Oscar nomination. And this will not be the first one that doesn't. So I think we can be pretty sure to say this will show up in the Oscar race in some way. It's just a matter of, is it this year? Is it next year? When does that happen? But this one feels like it's going to be quite a big movie, and I, for one, cannot wait to see it. At my number 10 slot, I am including Sentimental Value. This is the Joachim Trier film from Neon. I'm sorry to any of the Norwegians out there. I don't know how to say this guy's name. This one is very heavily rumored for Cannes. It's likely to be Neon's Cannes push, the same way that Anora was last year. Sometimes they purchase their movies at Cannes, sometimes they bring their movies to Cannes, and this is one that they will be bringing. And the premise to this one sounds fantastic. This is about an actor and her sister who are grieving the loss of their mother when their father, who is a celebrated filmmaker, re-enters their lives after years missing. He's written a script and he wants his daughter, who is a very famous Norwegian actor, he wants his daughter to play the lead role. But when the daughter refuses this role, he ends up meeting a Hollywood star and casting her in his daughter's place. He moves the entire production with this Hollywood star and everything into his village with these two daughters there, and he tries to use this film as an excuse to get closer to them. So it's a bit of a family bonding film, but it's also a film about filmmaking. Stellan Skarsgård will play the father. Renate Reinsve is playing the daughter, who is an actress. Elle Fanning is the Hollywood performer who comes into this. And it's basically the entire team from The Worst Person in the World coming back together. The Worst Person in the World, in a different year, could have gotten into Best Picture. We honestly could have seen that if Drive My Car was not in that year. I think it took some of its votes. But the big question here is, does this win the Palme d'Or? And if it doesn't, does that even matter? This is almost certainly going to be for them this year what Anora was last year. Regardless of whether or not it won the Palme, Anora was going to be the big movie that Neon had coming out of Cannes. We've got a fantastic premise here. We've got a great team riding on the wave from The Worst Person in the World. We have a film about the film industry and a lot of great chances for the actors to really shine. I think we could see both Renate Reinsve and Stellan Skarsgård get nominations for this. In fact, I think Stellan Skarsgård has a really good narrative for an Academy Award win if it comes to that. If this movie is good, I could absolutely see him winning for a character like this. And so that's my number 10. That wraps up my top 10 movies. Those are the films that at this point I think will be nominated for Best Picture. But that's not the whole video. I could easily wrap it up there and say, that's it, we're done, let's move on. But no. There's a lot more movies coming next year. So let's move on to the next tier of films. These are the films that I have on the edge. The films that I think look really solid for a nomination, but there might be one or two things holding me off from putting it into the top 10. So at number 11, I have Kathryn Bigelow's untitled White House thriller. And this one is a real-time thriller set inside the White House in the 90 minutes or so after someone sends ballistic missiles to hit US soil. So it's all about what happens in this doomsday scenario, what goes on in the White House when they are informed that there is a missile en route and it will strike United States soil and the world will essentially end because of mutually assured destruction. So it's a great premise. It's got a cast that's really stacked, including Rebecca Ferguson, Idris Elba, Anthony Ramos, Tracy Letts, Greta Lee. It's written by Noah Oppenheim, who is the writer behind Jackie, which is something that's a little bit not giving me the most confidence. This is not a writer who has written films like this in the past. Also, the fact that Kathryn Bigelow has not really made an appearance since Detroit. She's been a little bit in director's jail for some reason. I don't understand. What did she do that made it so that Detroit was seen as such a flop that she had to just disappear for years? I don't know. But she's back, and this film does sound really interesting. I just can't get behind it being bigger than Frankenstein right now, and I'm not about to put two movies from Netflix into my top 10 this early into the season. It could be a really big thing, or it could just be a forgettable thriller that comes and goes. At number 12, I have a film that I think a lot of people are going to be screaming at me saying it needs to be higher. And this is Paul Thomas Anderson's film, The Battle of Bacton Cross, which might also be called One Battle After Another, which might also be called Bad Hombres of Bacton Cross. But there are a few red flags on this one, which I'll talk about in a moment. But just some context, what The Battle of Bacton Cross is about. It is apparently a modern-day adaptation of Thomas Pynchon's book Vineland, which is a story set in the year of Reagan's re-election. So we're seeing some parallels between the Reagan era and the Trump era. And it follows a guy in Northern California who every year he is paid by the government to do something insane on TV, to pull off some stunt, to do something illegal that's going to rile people up. So every year he ends up doing doing some ridiculous live chase, like a bank robbery, a heist, something that's going to get people talking, something that's going to get people afraid. And he ends up coming face to face with an old nemesis of his who brings a highly trained strike team in to stop this year's stunt, to stop him from whatever he's planning, forcing him and his daughter into hiding. It's being described as Paul Thomas Anderson's most mainstream and accessible film so far. It's also shot on 35mm VistaVision, exactly like The Brutalist. Expect this to play a 70mm roadshow. It's also notable that the production budget of this one is over $140 million. And this is my big red flag with this one. Because Paul Thomas Anderson's highest grossing film so far only made $76 million total. And they gave him double that for the budget. So what I'm worried about with this one is that giving him that money, giving him that creative freedom, yes, this film is going to be really crazy. It could be absolutely phenomenal. But regardless of how mainstream he tries to take it, I do not expect this to be a mainstream film. I don't expect this to be a movie that's going to connect with the crowds, especially if it is the allegory for Trumpism that it seems like they're heading towards. This seems like box office poison. And if this ends up not recouping, which it would need to make $300 million to recoup, it's going to have a cloud over its head of being one of the biggest box office disasters of the year. And no matter how good the movie is, that's going to hurt it. That's going to hurt it at PGA. And it reminds me a lot of Babylon, a film that was so huge, people still really liked it, but it was so huge and it failed so spectacularly that people just couldn't touch it. It's still got some nominations, and I think that The Battle of Bacton Cross will get some nominations no matter what, because there will be some branches that don't give a shit about whether it was a flop or not. But this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt Warner Brothers. They are going to want to bury it because it's going to have hurt their wallets. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a phenomenal success and it makes $300 million plus and everyone loves it, but it's got a really difficult thing, which is a combination of an art house filmmaker, a big budget, and political allegory that half of the country isn't going to want anything to do with. I can't wait to see it, but in terms of Oscar chances, that is going to affect how I'm thinking about this film, and that's why it's not in my top 10 right now, when it seems like this will be the easy film to predict to be the Best Picture winner very early in the year. I'm not going to fall into that. I'm not going to say that Paul Thomas Anderson is winning Best Picture for a film that I think will make like $30 to $40 million total and will lose the studio over $100 million. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. Please prove me wrong. So let's move to the next one. At number 13, The Ballad of a Small Player. This is the new film by Edward Berger, who, of course, has just had Conclave, has just had All Quiet on the Western Front. He's on a hot streak. This is coming from Netflix. It's based on a book which follows the story of a corrupt English lawyer who flees to Macau, posing as a lord there. He's a con man who spends his nights at the gambling tables. And apparently there's an element of a ghost story, love story in here, as he meets someone at the poker tables who may or may not be a ghost. And it sounds a lot like All of Us Strangers, but for straight people. And why I have this so high is just Edward Berger is on fire right now. You can't really doubt someone who's coming off of 2 Best Picture nominees in a row. But the question is, can he stay that way? Can he go on to get a third one? And why I'm leaning no is that the book for this, if you look up the Goodreads, it has a 3.48 on Goodreads, which is fine, it's decent, but it's not exceptional, especially when you compare it to something like Conclave, which has a 4.02. So that is a significant step down just in the source material. And it sounds like a smaller, quieter film. There's not many actors in this one. It's Colin Farrell, Tilda Swinton, and Fala Chen. It's a love story that really focuses on loneliness and quiet. Is this going to be the right fit for a filmmaker like Edward Berger. And that's what's raising those red flags for me right now. I don't know if this is going to be the right film for this guy. But regardless, it has to be high up because you can't really doubt him right now. And so although I do have my reasons to doubt the movie, I do have to keep it quite high up on my list. At number 14, I have Park Chan-wook's new film, which is No Other Choice. This one's probably going to be hitting Cannes. It would be very surprising if it didn't. And this is based on the novel The Axe, which is a horror thriller about a man who is laid off to cut costs by his company. And after spending months and months and months trying to get jobs and failing over and over, he comes very, very close to getting a job and decides to take out his competition to make sure that he has the best chance of getting the job possible by becoming a serial killer, murdering all of the other people in the area that have the same qualifications that he does. Park Chan-wook is due for an awards breakout. Like so many of the filmmakers that I mentioned up above, he's someone who's been working hard for years. He is always critically acclaimed, and yet he's never quite broken through. Decision to Leave looked like it was going to be the one that was going to get him an international feature nomination, and then it didn't. It just came up short. But this one will certainly be critically adored. It will likely win a prize at Cannes, and the book that it's based on has received very, very strong reviews. It's a pitch black comedy that has been compared to one of my favorite films, Kind Hearts and Coronets. And what I'm really excited for with this one is that Park Chan-wook is mixing his usual propensity for violence and for really absurd big ideas, and he's mixing that together with something that's socially relevant, with something that's satirically cutting. No Other Choice sounds like something that could really hit well in the current political climate. So this one could be a Parasite-level breakout, and I would really, really hope that it is. This has also been a passion project for Park ever since 2009. He's been trying to get this made. Originally, it was meant to be in English, but when he went into production, he decided to do it in Korean. This one's possibly going to be too violent. It might be too much. And that's the only thing dissuading me from this. I know that someday Park Chan-wook will have his Oscars moment. It's just a matter of a question. Is it for this one or is it for another one down the road? And we'll just have to see when this premieres. At number 15, there is Hamnet. This is the Chloe Zhao film. It's being released by Focus Features, and it is based on a book which is a fictionalized version of William Shakespeare's life following the death of his 11-year-old son, Hamnet, who possibly was the inspiration for the plays Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, Twelfth Night. Instead of focusing on William Shakespeare, it's really mostly zoning in on Agnes Shakespeare, William Shakespeare's life at one point. It's Chloe Zhao's first real movie post Nomadland because The Eternals doesn't count, in my opinion. This is the first time we're seeing her tackle something that is quote-unquote Oscar bait again. And being based on this very popular, very acclaimed book, Maggie Farrell, who wrote the book, is writing the script alongside Chloe Zhao. Sam Mendes was meant to be the director of this one, and he had to drop out for his Beatles projects and gave the project to Chloe Zhao. And Steven Spielberg is on as a producer with this. I'm also really interested by the fact that Lucas Zhao is the cinematographer behind Ida and Cold War. He is the cinematographer of this film, so I'm certain it's going to look stunning. But a big question I have, and why it's a little bit lower down my list, despite sounding so tailor-made for the Oscars from a Best Picture winning director, being a historical drama about William Shakespeare based on an acclaimed book. The question that I have is Chloe Zhao the right filmmaker for this material? And that's a question that I don't know the answer to genuinely. We've seen her work on The Rider, on Nomadland. She has this very ethereal tone to her filmmaking, not very plot-centric. She really films with this sort of dreamlike composition. And I'm still not certain if that is the right filmmaker for this movie. Even with Eternals, she didn't really prove herself to have that sort of other style of filmmaking at her disposal. So if you were to just transpose Nomadland and put it into like a Shakespearean movie, How is that going to work? And regardless, I think it's going to be competitive in some of the tech elements. The actors, Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley, really feel like they could end up in the race. At number 16, The Life of Chuck, a film that I have already seen through the Toronto International Film Festival. This is being released by Neon. It was directed by Mike Flanagan, and it's coming out in May this year. This is the TIFF People's Choice Award winner. It's an adaptation of a Stephen King novella, but instead of being the scary side of Stephen King, it's much softer, it's much more sentimental. There is a reason why this was a TIFF People's Choice winner. It is sappy, it's sentimental, it's sweet, and it's unexpected. And some people might say, Matt, it won the People's Choice Award, why do you not have it in your top 10? I think the main reason why we see a correlation between the People's Choice Award and the Oscars is momentum. I think if The Life of Chuck had been released in the fall, it would have, without a doubt, been in our Best Picture lineup right now, because people would have been talking about it as the People's Choice Award winner. It would have been moving, and there would have been unstoppable momentum behind it. The TIFF People's Choice Award has that much sway. Will it have as much sway for a movie that is now half a year old, something that is now releasing in May, and will then have months and months and months and months afterwards to hold that? This is going to be undoubtedly a lot of people's favorite summer movie. It's going to do extremely well with its core audience. People will like this movie, but will Neon care enough to push it into the awards season? Honestly, in my opinion, I think that the TIFF People's Choice Award winner buzz only lasts for like 3 months. And I feel like no one is going to, when it hits May, no one's going to care that this won TIFF. People aren't going to be thinking of it that way. They're just going to be thinking of it as a Stephen King adaptation. So maybe the audience love can sustain it, but I don't think that we need to be considering this as a People's Choice Award winner in the way that we normally would with a film releasing in the fall. At number 17, Blue Moon, directed by Richard Linklater, coming from Sony Pictures Classics releasing. Now, there's some confusion around when this is releasing. Internal studio rumors are saying it's coming in May, but I'm assuming it's just a Cannes launch and we're going to see the film actually come out a little bit later in the year. This is set in Sardi's restaurant on the opening night of Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical Oklahoma. And it follows the songwriter Lawrence Hart, formerly the creative partner of Oscar Hammerstein. And it follows him as he basically is watching his creative partner finding new success as he debuts his first musical. Ethan Hawke is playing Lorenz Hart, and Andrew Scott is playing Oscar Hammerstein. I think Bobby Cannavale is playing Richard Rodgers. As much as Hollywood likes stories about Hollywood, Hollywood also likes stories about Broadway. Oklahoma has a large devoted fan base within the Academy, and so doing this Beatty story about Oklahoma, about these famous songwriters, getting Ethan Hawke and Andrew Scott playing these legends in the field of songwriting, it's really exciting. But that said, we have to remember the last time that Richard Linklater did do a movie that sounded like incredible Oscar bait, which was a behind the scenes of a famous production. That was Me and Orson Welles, a film that went nowhere for the Academy Awards, but it was a film, it sounded like pure bait. And this is from the same writer who did Me and Orson Welles. So to me, that is a little bit of a red flag popping up, where that one did not perform well with the Academy, and this is the same writer, the same brain. We could see Richard Linklater deliver something that people don't care as much about, even though it seems perfect for the Academy Awards. Richard Linklater is always most interesting when his films feel really deeply authentic. His films are much less interesting in my mind when he's trying to do something that isn't authentically him, which Blue Moon does feel a little bit like, but I can't deny that this just sounds so tasty in terms of Academy Awards prospects. So that's why it's my number 17 pick. At number 18, The History of Sound. This is directed by Oliver Hermanus, the South African filmmaker responsible for Living, starring Bill Nighy, and apparently they are aiming for a Cannes debut on this one. So there's no studio attached yet. That's not why I'm excited for this. I'm excited because Oliver Hermanus is a filmmaker that I think is on the up and up and up. Living was a phenomenal film. It was beautifully shot, beautifully captured, beautifully staged. And from the sounds of it, the history of sound is another step in the right direction for this filmmaker. So this one is a gay love story that focuses on two men falling in love as they roam around the Maine countryside, collecting folk songs and field recordings from soldiers in the wake of the Great War. The book that this is based on has phenomenal reviews. On Goodreads, The History of Sound holds a 4.35 out of 5. People love the book that this is based on, short story that this is based on. Great cast who's on fire right now. The two leads are Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor. It just seems like the perfect storm to be like the Letterboxd film Twitter favorite of the year. I want to know who is distributing this. It feels like it should be a Searchlight movie. I could see this be a Focus Features movie, but it just depends whose slate this falls onto. But it's got everything it needs. It seems like the type of movie that just has everything in place to be perfect for awards season. At number 19, Bradley Cooper's new movie, Is This Thing On? This is another one that I have doubts this makes it out this year. It has not filmed yet. Apparently it'll start filming in February. I am not certain it's going to be finished in time. There are no plot details yet, but it seems like it is about a comedian. That's all we know at this point, really, is there's something to do with a comedian in this one. It was written by and stars Will Arnett. I believe Will Arnett is in the lead role, although Bradley Cooper will also be acting in this one. The rumors about it being about stand-up comedy, something a little bit lighter, more comedic, makes it sound a little bit more like a Mike Birbiglia film than it does like a Bradley Cooper next awards staple movie. I don't see this being Maestro. I don't see this being A Star Is Born. I see it being a good movie that might be a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, a little bit more just a group of friends playing around. Will Arnett and Bradley Cooper have been friends for years, and this is a great opportunity for them to just make a project together. I am not really confident that this is a big awards player, but being Bradley Cooper, I do have to put it pretty high up. And wrapping up this top 20, I have F1 coming from Joseph Kosinski. This is going to be a summer release coming from Warner Brothers in partnership with Apple. F1 follows the story of a retired Formula One driver who comes out of retirement in order to mentor a rookie for the Apex Grand Prix. Basically, it sounds exactly like Top Gun Maverick, but with cars instead of planes. Wow. Wow, what an original idea. But look, this is Joseph Kosinski's follow-up to Top Gun Maverick. It does have Claudio Miranda doing cinematography. It does have Hans Zimmer doing music. I have no doubt that this is going to look and sound phenomenal. I have a feeling this is going to do incredible numbers at the box office. It's a contender for the dad movie of the year. And I think the fact that they're using a lot of real footage of F1 racing that Claudio Miranda was capturing for multiple years. They've been shooting this for ages because they've been having to capture so many different races. There's some really interesting elements with that. Now, that said, some of the red flags here, of course, Joseph Kosinski has never been an Oscar filmmaker before Top Gun Maverick, and just because of Top Gun Maverick, he doesn't just start being one. Also, this is Aaron Kruger solo writing this, not a writer with a very good track record, right? He did Top Gun Maverick, but he's also done shit like Transformers: Dark of the Moon. There's not a lot on his track record that's promising, but I just feel like I have to have this here because it feels really strong for cinematography, for editing, for sound, for visual effects. This has a really good nomination package in terms of technicals, and if it is a huge box office haul, if it is that dad movie of the year, maybe, just maybe, Joseph Kosinski could capture lightning in a bottle again and just serve up that perfect dad movie formula that is like irresistible for some voters. So we're moving into the next 20, which is going to be a little step lower again. I still think that these movies have potential for a Best Picture nomination, but I'm getting a little bit, there's more and more red flags popping up, more and more reservations that have me not being able to put them much higher up. So at number 21, Rian Johnson's new Knives Out movie, which is Wake Up Dead Man. We don't know much about the premise of this one, the location, what it's going to be talking about, but it is the next Knives Out movie. Daniel Craig is returning, and both previous movies have landed a screenplay nomination, so we have little reason to doubt that this one could do the same. But the question I have is, how long can Rian Johnson keep this franchise fresh? How long can he keep it so that audiences, critics are loving the movies, they're giving it awards, they're picking up some ensemble wins or nominations, and they're picking up screenplay nominations? It would be really great to know literally any details about this one beyond just the cast, but I have no reason to believe that this won't be excellent, as good as Knives Out, as good as Glass Onion, and the cast is really strong too. Josh O'Connor, Glenn Close, Josh Brolin, Mila Kunis, Jeremy Renner, Andrew Scott, Kaylee Spaney. And if I'm looking at this group and I'm thinking who could be the Janelle Monáe of this one, wouldn't it be great to see Glenn Close's career narrative that's been trying to manifest for years and years and years? Wouldn't it be great if that happened in a Knives Out movie and she had like a really meaty mystery role? Could be a lot of fun. But yeah, with the fact that Knives Out and Glass Onion were so well received and they couldn't get into Best Picture, I have very little reason to believe that Wake Up Dead Man will be better than them, will be able to overcome the obstacles that they succumbed to, which is why I have it down in my 20s here. At number 22, I have the untitled Joni Mitchell biopic coming from Cameron Crowe. This one has not shot yet, but Cameron Crowe has been saying that they are aiming to have it released on Christmas next year. So the aim is a December 25th release, and this is rumored to be a very unusual biopic, something that sort of takes the typical biopic formula that we see in stuff like A Complete Unknown, undoubtedly that we'll see in Michael, and twists it a little bit, does something a little bit more creative. It's also rumored at the moment that Meryl Streep will be playing an older version of Joni. It has not been announced who the younger version is, but I'm gonna be honest, I think my feeling is Saoirse Ronan might be playing Joni, which would be crazy. That would be, honestly, if Saoirse Ronan signed on as young Joni Mitchell and Meryl Streep was old Joni Mitchell, this rockets up my list. Cameron Crowe and Joni Mitchell have been very, very long time friends, so they've been cooking up this together for a long, long time, wanting to make this movie together. And it sounds like a far more interesting biopic than most others. Honestly, of all of the music biopics releasing this year, this is the one that I'm most fascinated by. And that might be because I just love Joni Mitchell much more than I love Bruce Springsteen, much more than I love Michael Jackson. I think Joni Mitchell is one of the greatest to ever live. That said, Cameron Crowe has not made a movie since Aloha, but he's due for a return to form. That said, you know, his movies before that even were stuff like We Bought a Zoo, and it's not inspiring a lot of confidence. Like, he might just not be in his Jerry Maguire Almost Famous days anymore. And at 23, our other music biopic that we have here, which is Deliver Me From Nowhere, directed by Scott Cooper. It's coming from 20th Century Studios, and this one is about Bruce Springsteen. And fortunately as well, this is not a womb to tomb biopic. This is not like Michael, which is going to go from when Michael Jackson was a kid to when he died. This is specifically documenting the period in Bruce Springsteen's life when he was sitting in his bedroom recording Nebraska with an acoustic guitar and a 4-track recorder. That's interesting to me, not only because it's a really unique take on a biopic to focus it on one really specific recording session of a group, but it's also my favorite Springsteen album that they're talking about. I am so much more interested to learn about this stripped back phase of Bruce Springsteen's career than I would be something like Born to Run or something like Born in the USA. That said, the director, Scott Cooper, insanely inconsistent, to say the least. He came onto the scene really hot with Crazy Heart, winning Jeff Bridges an Oscar, and then it was Out of the Furnace, and then it was Black Mass. He did Antlers recently. It feels like every film of his has just not clicked the same way that Crazy Heart did all those years ago. So I do have doubts that Scott Cooper will be able to make a film that actually lands with awards once again. That said, of course, Jeremy Allen White is the lead of this one. He's been doing incredibly well on TV, but I also have doubts. Is Jeremy Allen White the right person for Bruce Springsteen? I'm not sure. I'll have to see that first. I'll have to see a trailer to really get it. There's lots about this one that sounds amazing. I think the premise is great, but some of it feels like it could be really messy. And so I can't make any definitive statements on this one yet as to whether it is or is not going to be an awards contender, which is why it's down here. At number 24, The Lost Bus. This is directed by Paul Greengrass for Apple, and it is set during the Paradise Fires, and it follows a bus driver who is trying to get a field trip of kids to safety from the fire. So it stars Matthew McConaughey as the bus driver and America Ferrera, who plays the teacher of the students. Now, Paul Greengrass is a director who is known for his real tragedy films. It's also done by the writer of Mayor of Easttown. So there's some interesting stuff here, but that said, Paul Greengrass, super hit or miss. And basically everything he's done since Captain Phillips has not really landed like we're expecting it to. And this, to me, is feeling a lot more like 22 July than it is Captain Phillips. So I'm not feeling like this is really going to be a big one, but it's still worth keeping an eye on. At number 25, another film that I don't think is going to release this year, along with Judy and Is This Thing On? This is the untitled Damien Chazelle project. Paramount is releasing it. They do have it slated for a 2025 release, but we have heard nothing about it. We've heard no casting news, no plot details, other than it is apparently an original script that is set in a prison. We don't know anything more about it, but Damien Chazelle, he's out of director's jail. He's back making a movie. Knowing so little details about it, it's really hard to justify putting it higher than it is right now. If we learn more, it could go up a lot higher, but most likely we learn very early in the year that they're actually pushing this to 2026. Number 26 is Caught Stealing, the Darren Aronofsky movie coming from Sony. And this stars Austin Butler as a former baseball player who gets caught up in the New York crime scene when he ends up going on a treasure hunt. This is based on a really popular novel. It's a crime thriller movie, and everything about it does not sound like an Oscar film, but it does sound like a lot of fun. That sort of intersection of baseball and crime and the sort of on-the-run thriller that this seems to be. There's a lot to like about this. I'm not quite buying that it's an Oscar player right now, but you never know. I mean, Darren Aronofsky is just coming off of The Whale, and now Austin Butler is teaming up with him. Maybe there could be something there, but it is kind of just feeling like this is going to be more of an audience movie than it is an Oscar movie. And that's the vibe I have at this point. I look forward to it, though. Number 27, I have The Bride. This is Maggie Gyllenhaal's take on The Bride of Frankenstein. It was originally set to be with Netflix, but Netflix had competing Frankenstein films with The Bride and with Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. They chose del Toro, and so Maggie Gyllenhaal took this over to Warner Brothers. This is going to be releasing in late September, so it is going to be coming right out of TIFF likely, and it's going to be competing almost head-to-head with del Toro's Frankenstein. So immediately what I think of is, if I have to choose a Frankenstein movie, do I go with Maggie Gyllenhaal? Do I go with Guillermo del Toro? And there's a few reasons that I went with Guillermo del Toro beyond just he's Guillermo del Toro. For one thing, this is a musical remake of The Bride of Frankenstein. This is going to be campy. It has a Johnny Greenwood score, which is really interesting, actually. I think that's fantastic. Christian Bale will be the monster, and Jessie Buckley will be playing the Bride of Frankenstein. But it sounds goofy. It sounds over the top. It sounds ridiculous. Meanwhile, del Toro's take is promising something much more serious, something much more philosophical and grounded. And so when I think, what are the Oscars going to, if they have to choose one between the two of them, which they do, they're not going to nominate two films on the same source material in the same year. I mean, there's some categories that undoubtedly they will have both of them, or at least both will be in the conversation for it. This is assuming that they're both good, at least. One of them is philosophical, based on gothic romance, and the other is a campy musical version of the story. I have to lean to the serious gothic romance, something that feels like a Miltonian tragedy rather than something that's like a goofy, weirdo cult classic musical. And so that's why this one is a little bit further down. Honestly, if there was no Guillermo del Toro at all, this would probably be in the teens, because I'm very interested by the fact that it is a musical version of this story and that it is Maggie Gyllenhaal's follow-up to The Lost Daughter, which was so immensely successful and probably came this close to getting her an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. At number 28, The Smashing Machine, directed by Benny Safdie. This is coming from A24, and of the two A24 Safdie movies that are sports biopics coming this year, I am much less confident in The Smashing Machine. This one just seems to be a much more conventional film than Marty Supreme, than what Josh Safdie is cooking up right now. Now, of course, Dwayne Johnson is going to be giving his all, trying to get that Academy Awards love. But look, like, the story doesn't sound as interesting. It doesn't sound like there's as much going on with this one. Also, A24 already seems to have more confidence in Marty Supreme, a movie about fighting, and you have a movie about ping pong. Tell me why the movie about ping pong got more than double the budget of this one. This one doesn't have a release date released yet, whereas A24 already said Marty Supreme is coming next Christmas. There's just elements of it that are saying Marty Supreme is the more interesting movie of the two. Could they coexist? Absolutely they could. Will they coexist? I don't believe so. I could see some awards love coming for Dwayne Johnson, coming for Emily Blunt, but again, we'll just have to see how this one performs. I'm expecting this one to be at Cannes, while I expect Marty Supreme to show up at Venice. So when we get the Cannes lineup, if this is in competition, maybe it's worth giving a little bit more attention to, but right now, I'm a little bit skeptical. At number 29, the untitled Kendrick Lamar comedy. It's releasing on July 4th, directed by Trey Parker of South Park. And this one has a great premise, which is that a man who works as a reenactor at a slavery museum learns that his white girlfriend's ancestors once owned his ancestors. The script has been passed around for years. Apparently it's phenomenal. It's just like a ridiculous, over-the-top, really boundary-pushing script. As a huge fan of Book of Mormon, as a huge fan of what Trey Parker and Matt Stone are capable of, it's also clear that a lot of awards voters feel the way that I do. The way that Book of Mormon swept the Tony Awards and was taken so seriously, I have a feeling that if the South Park guys did something that had that sort of weight to it and presented it, the Oscars genuinely might bite for it. Also, Kendrick Lamar, very likely my favorite musician of all time. Him, Sufjan Stevens, those are the top two for me. And him doing a comedy like this is so different from the type of thing that he normally does. He's normally the ultra serious, conscious guy, and to do a comedy with the South Park team is really, really exciting. But that said, it is a comedy from the guys who did South Park, and it could be too raunchy, too boundary-pushing, too uncomfortable for the Academy to go to, or just simply too South Park. So it's yet to be seen. I could see this being an immense success. I could also see this be just totally not an awards thing. At number 30, The Phoenician Scheme, the new Wes Anderson movie, which is apparently a much darker film for Wes Anderson. It's less of a comedy than his other ones. It is a film about espionage, and it's apparently a father-daughter story. And a very interesting thing about this, beyond the turn to drama for Wes Anderson, is apparently Benicio del Toro is on screen in literally every single shot. But I am concerned why it doesn't have a distributor yet. Why is it that no one has purchased this film? Why not Focus? Why not Searchlight? Alarm bells do kind of start to ring when you've got a filmmaker who typically does get support from the same studios for movie after movie, and they're not getting that support for this one. That's sort of why I was skeptical of Queer last year. Why is it that Amazon MGM has supported every other Luca movie, and then suddenly for this one, they're like, actually, we'll pass on that one. So with The Phoenician Scheme, the fact that it does not have Searchlight or Focus features on side makes me wonder, is this one going to be a little bit of a pullback for Wes Anderson? Maybe he hasn't made that transition to drama as well as we might hope that he would. At number 31, Clara and the Sun from Taika Waititi, being distributed by Sony. Based on a Kazuo Ishiguro book, which is about a robot named Clara who exists to make people less lonely, to ease in the pain of loneliness in the world. It is an interesting pairing of writer and director, because you would never think Kazuo Ishiguro and Taika Waititi. You know who'd be great to direct a movie by the guy who wrote The Remains of the Day? Taika Waititi. Also worth noting that the script is also not written by Taika, so he had no hand in the writing of this movie. It's not going to be Jojo Rabbit, it's not going to be Hunt for the Wilder People, but it's also not going to be Next Goal Wins. It's also not going to be Thor, Love and Thunder. So I wonder if his sort of sarcasm, his snark, can take a back seat. And I will just also mention to people, like, Taika is not just disappearing based on a bad Thor movie and a mediocre Oscar bait movie. Next Goal Wins and Thor Love and Thunder did not kill his career. He will be fine. This does sound like a tearjerker if handled right. I just don't know if he's the right filmmaker for this one. And I don't know if him not having the script is going to make it feel a little bit less like a Taika Waititi movie. I'm not buying that this is a big contender at this point. It doesn't feel right, but I do think people are eager to write off Taika Waititi, and he's not going anywhere. He will be back in the Oscar race. I just don't know if it's going to be for this project in specific. At 32, Terrence Malick's film The Way of the Wind, a longtime passion project for him about the life and death of Jesus. They shot this film in 2019. They have been in the editing room for 5 full years. 5 years, Terrence Malick, 5 years. Why does it take you so long finish movies? Well, he's a relentless perfectionist. He's spent so much time trying to get it right. It's been a lifelong dream project, and I think that he just does not want to mess up the story of Jesus. So, hey, Terrence, take your time. And some people might say, oh, every year we think it's coming and it never does. What reason do you have to believe it's coming this year? Well, very, very good sources that I have said that it was finished for Venice, and they elected not to submit it for Venice because they wanted it to do Cannes. But that said, if it's not in the Cannes lineup, I don't think it's done, and I think we're going to be waiting a full other year. So this one will certainly be a stunning film. Terrence Malick's movies are always gorgeous to look at, gorgeous to behold, but are voters in the year of our Lord 2025 going to be ready to go for something heavily religious like this? I mean, Terrence Malick is a deeply spiritual, deeply religious person, and this is undoubtedly going to go hardcore into that religious territory. So is that going to be the type of movie that voters are interested in at this point? Alternately, though, it is a really great chance to award and recognize a master of the craft on something that's been a lifelong dream project. It makes a lot of sense for the Academy to say, Terrence Malick, you are a legend. You are someone that inspires all of us. We're going to award you. We're going to recognize you for your work because you might not have that many in you left, which is what people have been feeling ever since the Tree of Life. But he's just kept churning them out, and it seems like he's really slowed down with this one. So at 33, we have Weapons, Zach Cregger's new horror film for Warner Brothers. And I will say this is scheduled for January of 2026, but I've been hearing rumors that Warner Brothers is considering swapping around their schedule, where this might end up being moved into December. I could be wrong about that, but something about this is saying this is not a January movie. It's set in a small Florida town where school kids go missing in the middle of the night and where police corruption, witchcraft, and blood rituals all interweave. And what's really piquing my interest about Weapons, beyond the fact that Barbarian was such a phenomenal horror film, is that Netflix, Warner Bros., Universal all had a massive bidding war over the script. Warner Bros. Offered $38 million upfront. Jordan Peele, through Universal, was so pissed off that he did not end up getting this movie that he dropped his management company after losing the auction. So that's what's been reported. It's being described as an epic-sized horror film. Everything about it sounds so fascinating and so big. This does not sound like a January movie. And it could be a big disaster. It could be a Southland Tales level mess. But it could also become a horror classic. But I guess something that is a little bit worrying is there's a lot of recasts that have happened that have been downgrades. I think they've gone through like 3 or 4 casts before they actually filmed it, and every single time the cast got less prestigious. And again, the January release is worrying, but I just have a feeling that Warner Brothers is going to bring this back into 2025. And if that's the case, then I could see this ending up being a surprise contender. But again, it's not likely. Number 34, In the Hand of Dante. This is Julian Schnabel's new film, and it follows the life of Dante Alighieri as he writes the Divine Comedy. And it's simultaneously set in the 2000s as the author of the book, In the Hand of Dante, is working to write that book. So it's a dual storyline about the creation of art, about what it is that drives someone to write. And Julian Schnabel makes stunning movies. At Eternity's Gate, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and this is another very long project. Julian Schnabel's been working on In the Hand of Dante since 2011, but that said, I am often very skeptical of movies about writing books. Ultimately, I do feel like 34 is way too low for In the Hand of Dante. I really should have this higher, but something for me is just not quite clicking about it. I don't know what it is. This feels too low, but at the same time, I'm sticking with it. It's my number 34 for now. 35 is Mickey 17, the new Bong Joon-ho movie, which is releasing in April. Robert Pattinson plays a man who signs up to be cloned and shipped off into space where he will be killed repeatedly. This is Bong Joon-ho's follow-up movie from Parasite, and because he just won Best Picture in one of the most widely loved wins of all time, people are going to be yelling at me right now going, Matt, why do you have Bong Joon-ho's movie down at number 35? Well, it's the same reason I'm going to have Daniel's movie at number 35 next year. Just because a filmmaker wins Best Picture does not mean that they are the type of filmmaker who's going to continue making Oscar movies. Bong Joon-ho made 20 years worth of movies that did not hit at the Oscars before Parasite, and he's going to go back to making movies that don't hit with the Oscars after that. Parasite was not an Oscar movie because it was designed for Oscars. It was an Oscar movie because it was so good that people could not honor that film. And Mickey 17 seems like it's going to be good, but it's not going to be Parasite good. Also, the fact that Warner Brothers wanted to bury this film. They did everything in their goddamn power to make sure that no one fucking saw this thing. And it was going to be a January release for a Bong Joon-ho movie. For a while, I was worried that this film was going to get Zaslaved, that he was going to cut it for tax purposes. We should just count our lucky stars that this movie's even getting released, because it seems like Bong Joon-ho fought David Zaslav on every step of the way, and, you know, that probably almost led to us never seeing the film at all. But that said, this looks like a wild, crazy fun movie. It just doesn't need to be an Oscar movie. I will be considering this to get sound and visual effects nominations because I think the prestige of Bong Joon-ho is going to be enough to get it into those two categories, but I don't expect it to be anywhere else. At 36, we have Sacrifice, directed by Roman Gavra. Now, Roman Gavra just did one of my favorite movies of, I think it was 2022 that Athena came out. Athena showed that Roman Gavra is one of the most exciting new filmmakers out there. He did things in Athena that I still think should be impossible. I don't know how they made that movie, but it was absolutely phenomenal. And so he's the type of filmmaker where I'm watching out and saying, what is he doing next? Because he could make something that could really stun people in the right circumstances. Sacrifice is his English language debut, and it's about a film star played by Chris Evans who is kidnapped by a radical group who wants to sacrifice him to save the world. And the leader of that radical group is Anya Taylor-Joy. Also kidnapped is Vincent Castle, and also one of the kidnappers is Charlie XCX. So with a premise that sounds really funny, and a filmmaker like Roman Gavra coming off of something like Athena, this could be one of the most fun, biggest surprises of the year. It's a film that at least is one of my most anticipated. I can't in good conscience put it much higher than I have it right now, but I could see this jetting up later on in the year when we start seeing some footage from it. Number 37 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This is from director Christopher McQuarrie. It is Tom Cruise's final Mission Impossible movie, at least at the moment, until he decides that he hasn't had enough adrenaline and he needs to jump out of a helicopter again. This being the final movie with Tom Cruise means that perhaps there's a narrative for the series. Also, the last movie had 2 noms in VFX and sound. This could repeat that. This could also get a little bit more than that under the right circumstances. And Tom Cruise has so much power. Tom Cruise has so much love riding behind him. Honestly, if anything, I think this would boost Judy's profile if Judy releases this year and give Tom Cruise a little bit more of a narrative for a nomination for possibly a win. I really can't say that a Mission Impossible movie is going to be nominated for Best Picture, but I also think that there's a chance. There's a chance if this is like phenomenally big, if this is a Top Gun Maverick level hit, but it's really hard to imagine it being that when the last one underperformed a little bit. 38 is I Love Boosters, the Boots Riley film that he's doing for Neon. And this one is about a ring of shoplifters that go head-to-head with a ruthless CEO played by Demi Moore. This is getting her at the perfect time because she is so hot right now and really could boost this film's profile quite a bit coming off of The Substance. And Boots Riley is a filmmaker that I'm always excited for. Sorry to Bother You was phenomenal. I never saw I'm a Virgo because I don't watch much TV, but I heard it was quite good as well. Boots Riley is a filmmaker of the moment. He's someone who's always going to deliver biting, topical, sharp satire, and this seems like no exception. The only question I have is the Academy brave enough to award someone like Boots Riley, who is so pointed and would genuinely run a nightmarish campaign for any studio? God, the shit he would say on the campaign trail, I would love it. But it's the type of thing that would make any company shiver in their boots. I hope for the sake of all of us, we get a Boots Riley awards campaign, but goddamn, I just genuinely don't know if any company would let that happen. Then at number 39, another film people are going to yell at me for having too low. This is Materialists, Celine Song's follow-up to Past Lives, another A24 movie, and this one is being described as follows a matchmaker, her ex, and a businessman, and it's another love triangle movie. What is it with Celine Song and love triangles? And not just that, but like Justin Kritzky's as well. What is it with this couple and love triangles? They have a real thing for that sort of dynamic. Look, it is a follow-up to Past Lives. I can't deny that that's interesting, but the cast is a downgrade, in my opinion. Going from what they had, which was so beautiful, so authentic, to it's bigger movie stars this time. You know, it's Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans. Movie stars feel so much less raw, so much less real. It doesn't feel like this film is going to be as personal for Celine Song. So I am expecting Materialists to be a slight sophomore slump. I think that critics are still going to like it. I think audiences are still going to like it. I just don't think they're going to like it as much as Past Lives. This is not going to be Past Lives 2. And finishing off this second tier here, we have at number 40, Nouvelle Vague by Richard Linklater, the second Richard Linklater film on this list. And this one is about the making of Jean-Luc Godard's film Breathless, so the birth of the French New Wave. It's rumored to go to Cannes. It is entirely in French, and being a film about Godard and about the birth of the French New Wave, it is a real filmmaker's film, a film that's going to speak to people who love movies like the Academy. Now, that said, I do just think that when I look at a film about the making of Oklahoma and a film about the making of Breathless, and I think about the two of those, I feel like the general audience is going to care about Oklahoma much more. Oklahoma is a classic known by everyone, not just the hardcore cinephiles. Everyone knows Oklahoma. High schools put on productions of Oklahoma. Breathless is a cinephile thing. And it's just, it feels less commercial to me to do a film about Breathless. We've seen so many people try and do Godard movies in the past that just haven't clicked. You know, we saw Michel Hazanavicius do it a few years ago, and there was no bite on his film Godard Mon Amour. So I don't know what Linklater's going to do that's going to be more special with it. Also, the fact that this does not have a studio attached to it, does not have a distributor. While Blue Moon instantly has Sony Pictures Classics, they're not picking up this one. And when Linklater is not getting distribution from Sony Pictures Classics, I instantly go, what do you do wrong with this one, bud? What is that? So maybe eventually Sony Pictures Classics will buy it. I'm just curious why they didn't in advance, why they didn't bankroll part of the film. A little bit of a red flag there. I'm sure this one's going to be good, but it just doesn't feel like as much of an Oscar thing as what Blue Moon is reading to me right now. So let's move into the next 20 films. All of these films seem like they have an avenue, but again, it's shrinking smaller and smaller. So we got 41, Kiss of the Spider Woman. This is premiering at Sundance. So this is our first Sundance movie on the list. Maybe a Sundance movie should be a little bit higher up, but right now we don't know much about any of them. So Kiss of the Spider Woman, directed by Bill Condon. Bill Condon was the guy who wrote the screenplay for Chicago. He also directed Dreamgirls. He is really well versed in musicals. And Kiss of the Spider Woman is not a remake of the 80s William Hurt Best Picture nominee. It is an adaptation of the Broadway musical Kiss of the Spider Woman, which is music by Kander and Ebb, who did the music for Chicago, Cabaret, Kander and Ebb, classic duo. It is following the story of a gay hairdresser in an Argentinian prison who tells stories of his favorite movies, specifically his favorite Hollywood musical, to his fellow prisoners. And so there's two stories going on. Jennifer Lopez is in one of the stories. The hairdresser role is played by Tona Tia, and both of those roles are really juicy, have received awards on Broadway in the past. And so, yeah, like there's a lot about this that seems like it's really in the right spot. It's a movie musical from someone who has written a Best Picture winning musical in the past, who directed something that was undeniably number 6 for Best Picture with Dreamgirls in an expanded lineup. There's no doubt that that would have been nominated. But Bill Condon, he's also past his prime. He has not made a movie that's really hit in that way in over a decade, honestly, maybe since Dreamgirls. So I just wonder, can Bill Condon make a musical that lives up to what he did 2 decades ago with those movies? We're going to see very soon at Sundance. I'm really looking forward to seeing this one. I hope I can get a screener for it. 42, The Running Man, Edgar Wright's new movie, a remake of the classic movie as well as an adaptation of Stephen King's novel. It's about a game show that has people running around the world being hunted, and if they can survive being hunted, they win money. Edgar Wright, I believe one day that he's going to make a Best Picture nominee. The question is always, is it this one? A lot of people thought it was going to be Last Night in Soho, but it just was not. Baby Driver probably got as close as he's ever gotten. And this one has a great cast behind it, but honestly, The Running Man, it's a sci-fi movie. It's likely just a blockbuster. They're likely just trying to make some money with this one, but it sounds really fun, and maybe it's just good enough that it happens, but maybe it's a little too optimistic to believe that Edgar Wright's Oscar movie is going to be a blockbuster sci-fi action movie. So maybe not this one, but I'm keeping on holding out hope for you, Edgar. I want it. I want Oscar recognition for Edgar Wright. At 43, we have James L. Brooks' film Ella McKay. This is being released by 20th Century Studios. Emma Mackey plays a politician named Ella McKay who has to learn how to balance work and family when she takes over the role of governor for her state. James L. Brooks is a legend, a Best Picture winning filmmaker, one of the creators of The Simpsons. He did Broadcast News, he did Terms of Endearment, and this is his first movie since 2010. But the question I have is, does he still have it? He is in his mid-80s, and I feel like his writing might be a little bit stale, might be a little bit behind the times. Now, this, of course, does have a great ensemble cast, because who wouldn't want to work with James L. Brooks on his latest film? But at the same time, I'm just worried that he might not have it anymore. His 2010 film was not well received whatsoever, and this could just be more of that. Regardless, it's great to see a legend returning this year. I just don't think that it's going to be an Oscar movie. Number 44 is Spike Lee's Highest to Lowest. This is being released by Apple and A24, and it's coming out sometime in the spring. We don't have an exact release date, though. This is, of course, a remake of the classic Akira Kurosawa film, which is about a kidnapping where the kidnappers attempted to target the son of a wealthy executive, but mistakenly kidnap his chauffeur's kid instead. We remember the last time that Spike Lee did a remake of a really highly regarded film from Asia. Old Boy did not do well, but you know what? I have faith in Spike. Spike Lee is likely my favorite filmmaker of all time. Every movie he does is so unique and fresh. This has to be like top 5 most anticipated movies of the year. Also, I'm really excited to see both Denzel Washington and A$AP Rocky in lead roles here. With all that said, this is not BlacKkKlansman. This is not Da 5 Bloods. This does not seem like something that has to be an awards movie. It doesn't need to be awards-centric. It's just going to be a fun thriller. And so it's lower down my list because I don't really see an angle for it in that way, but I think it's going to be phenomenal. Number 45 is At the Sea, directed by the Hungarian filmmaker Cornel Mundruczó, who previously did Pieces of a Woman. And this one's being described as a drama in which Amy Adams plays a woman who leaves rehab and goes to her family's beach home to be isolated and readjusting to her sober life. It sounds very similar to The Outrun, which I'm going to be honest is not a really great sign in terms of how interesting this is going to be. It's never the most interesting formula for a movie to have a story about a character just trying to stay sober. That's a very difficult time in someone's life, but it's also a time when inaction is the thing that's needed. And so that it's tricky to make films on this topic that are really compelling. Books, on the other hand, phenomenally compelling because it's all an internal struggle. But that internal struggle is rarely, very seldom as interesting on film as it is in writing. But that said, Amy Adams is due for a good role, and Cornel Mundruczó is a great filmmaker who is just waiting to have his moment in the spotlight. Pieces of a Woman got him really close. I am certain that a filmmaker with the formal excellence that Cornel Mundruczó shows, he is one day going to have his moment. I don't know if this is going to be the one, though, but I'm watching out. He's going to be high up on my list someday. 46 is David Lowery's A24 film Mother Mary, which is about the relationship between a pop star and a fashion designer. David Lowery needs his moment. Green Knight was fantastic. I think he's a filmmaker who undeniably at some point will be in the Oscar race, but he's described Mother Mary as being a really weird film. And when the filmmaker is saying this is one of my weirdest movies yet, maybe this is just going to be a little bit too Gen Z. Maybe it's going to be a little bit too online focused. It also has Jack Antonoff and Charlie XCX composing music for this one, which is really exciting. And I think we could see this get a song nomination or a costume design nomination, but it does not sound very Oscar-y to me at this moment. I feel like it might be a launch pad for something David Lowery does later to get Oscar love, but at this point, I'm thinking this is song and this is costumes. 47 is The Wave, directed by Sebastian Lelio. This is a musical set amidst a feminist protest at a Chilean university. This one was rumored for Venice this year, but was not present in the lineup. Either was rejected or wasn't finished on time. I don't know. But Sebastian Lelio, always very interesting. He is an Oscar winner for his international feature winner, A Fantastic Woman. And so this could be an awards contender. He could be someone who one day ends up being in the general fields. Musicals are in right now, but I think the question is this going to be more Emilia Perez or is this going to be Annette? And we don't know which it's going to be at this point. But it's still worth considering, and it's definitely worth considering for one of those international feature spots for Chile's submission. 48 is Kelly Reichardt's film The Mastermind, which she is doing for Mubi. This stars Josh O'Connor as an art thief against the backdrop of the Vietnam War. And so it sounds like an interesting movie, doing a mix of a filmmaker like Kelly Reichardt, who makes hardline, like, art films,
one of the most fascinating filmmakers out there, but doing something in the heist genre sounds really fascinating. Sounds like it could be not only a critic darling, but it could have a little bit more mainstream appeal than most of Kelly Reichardt's films have had in the past. If something is going to break her onto the awards scene, it would be more something like this than something like Showing Up. It's possible that Kelly Reichardt is a filmmaker who just never makes a film that the Oscars would ever like, but this sounds like her best shot that she's ever had. 49 is Hedda, the Nia DaCosta film for Amazon MGM. It's based on Henrik Ibsen's play Hedda Gabler, which is about a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage that she does not want to be in. So we've seen a distinct pattern of stage adaptations underperforming a little bit. Every once in a while they get in, but they have to do something really spectacular to justify why they are a film and why they are not a stage play. I feel like the best prospects this has is Tessa Thompson. Tessa Thompson is playing one of the greatest dramatic roles ever, but I do worry that the film is going to struggle to escape its theatrical origins. And so I do feel like this is going to be stagey. It's not going to be much of a contender, but it will get some buzz for Tessa Thompson in that lead role. We could definitely see her get nominated, but even then I would see the film being like this low down on the Best Picture list. Number 50 is Anne Lee, directed by Mona Fastvold, notable for being the co-writer of The Brutalist. And Anne Lee is the newest film she's directing. She co-wrote it with Brady Corbet, so this is the follow-up to The Brutalist. But we can't suddenly be all in on everything that Corbet and Fastvold do. They aren't always going to be Oscar players. They never have been before. Vox Lux was not. The World to Come was not. The Childhood of a Leader was not. None of those films have been big contenders, and it's not like just since The Brutalist worked for them, everything that they do always will be. It does have an interesting premise, which is a musical about a famous cult leader in America. And like I said with The Waves, so many musicals this year. Musicals are in right now, but is this Emilia Perez? Is this Wicked? Or is this Annette? Is this The End? And what I'm feeling Brady Corbet, Mona Fastvold musical would be is much more of The End than Emilia Perez. So I am thinking this is going to be an interesting film. It's not one I'm feeling really strong about for Academy Awards. Now that brings us into the 50s. I'm already far past, I think last year's video, I only talked about like 40 films total. And I'm still at a point where I'm saying films that I think, like, I see a path for. I see a possibility. As much as I'm getting more and more red flags as we go, I'm seeing paths for each of these movies still. So this maybe is going to be one of the best years for cinema ever, because God, these movies sound really interesting all the way down here. So number 51 is Sorry Baby, directed by Eva Victor. It's premiering in the Sundance Dramatic Competition, and there is no premise for the film so far. They are extremely minimally descriptive with this. The film is being described as something bad happened to Agnes, but life goes on. Well, at least it does for everyone around her. That tells me nothing. I don't know what this movie's about. So why is it on my list if I don't know anything about it? Well, it's because Barry Jenkins and Adele Romansky produced it. And that was how we could have nailed down After Sun a few years ago when it premiered at the Cannes Directors Fortnight. We saw that Barry Jenkins and Adele Romansky did it, and we went, maybe that's worth taking a look at. I trust those two. What did they see in this film? And Sorry Baby is the same. What did Barry Jenkins see in this project? We don't know a damn thing about it, but we do know that this has the potential to be a massive indie breakout coming out of Sundance. 52 is Orphan, the new film by Laszlo Nemes, the director of Son of Saul, and this tells the story of a child who, years after the Holocaust, he waits for his father to return from the camps. It's set in mid-50s Budapest. I firmly believe in the modern era, Son of Saul would have been nominated for Best Picture. Son of Saul would have been like an 8 or 9 nomination movie if it was released now. 2015, he was just a couple years too early. Laszlo Nemes, I think, is an incredible formalist filmmaker who will certainly one day make another great film. Is this the film? If Orphan shows up in the Cannes lineup, instantly I'm going to be thinking that this could be a big sensation. Number 53, Belly of the Beast. This is the follow-up from Andrew Haigh to All of Us Strangers. This tells the story of a writer who becomes a mentor for a convicted criminal. It stars Ben Stiller and Colin Farrell. The premise is interesting. It's based on a real-world story, but it doesn't sound quite like the right film for Andrew Haigh. You know, if All of Us Strangers couldn't get him in, then I don't think this is the film that'll push him there. Also, we don't know if this film's going to be done this year. So that's another reason why I have it a little bit lower. Not sure on this one. 54 is Golden. This is Michel Gondry's new film, a musical biopic of Pharrell Williams. We just saw Piece by Piece this year. And, you know, what are we getting from Golden that wasn't already in Piece by Piece? I'm not sure about that. But Michel Gondry directing it sounds fantastic. He's getting a really big budget again. He hasn't had that in quite some time. There's a negative, which is we see the Dear Evan Hansen team reuniting on this. The screenplay is by Stephen Levinson, and Pasek and Paul are writing original songs for it alongside Pharrell Williams. So it could be a huge mess, or it could just be fun. But, you know, I'm not really expecting this to be a big sensation because Pharrell Williams' life story is not that awe-inspiring. It's going to be fun, but I don't see this as being like the weighty Best Picture movie that everyone needs to talk about. Now at 55, Roofman, the new Derek Cianfrance film, and it follows a true crime story of a former Army Reserve officer who becomes a fugitive from the law, who breaks into McDonald's locations through the door on their roof, and he hides in the roof of Toys R Us to hide from the police, and he got the nickname Roofman because all of his crimes had to do with roofs, which is weird. Look, this is a filmmaker who needs a return to prominence. He looked so promising after Blue Valentine and The Place Beyond the Pines coming back to back, and he just hasn't lived up to that potential that he's had for all these years. It's a really odd true story, but one that I can't imagine will make a great or really deep or interesting film. It sounds entertaining, doesn't sound like something that's going to be an awards player, but, you know, prove me wrong, Derek Cianfrance. 56 is The Wedding Banquet, directed by Andrew Ahn, the director of Fire Island. It stars Bowen Yang and Lily Gladstone, and it focuses on the story of a gay Taiwanese American who agrees to a green card marriage for a friend. But when his parents arrive for the wedding, only then do they realize that he's gay. It's a remake of a classic Ang Lee film from the 1990s. It's going to be a really fun comedy. It's going to be a crowd pleaser for sure. And Bowen Yang getting a lead role is very exciting. I think this one's likely to be left behind. It is getting a spring release coming out in April from Bleecker Street. Likely that this won't be remembered at the end of the year, but it sounds just lovely. It's getting a Sundance debut. I could see it being one of the big, most talked about films at Sundance. I'm struggling to see it lasting to the end of the year. Now at 57, here's another one that people are going to yell at me for. Jay Kelly, the new Noah Baumbach film coming from Netflix, which is being described as a coming-of-age story about adults. And it stars George Clooney, it stars Greta Gerwig, Adam Sandler, Laura Dern. It's a great cast. But look, I think that Marriage Story was a fluke. I don't think that Noah Baumbach needs to make Oscar movies ever again. I don't think he's ever tried to. Marriage Story was the perfect storm because it was so deeply emotional. And I don't know if he goes back to his sort of like Francis Ha, Mistress America style or like Greenberg style of filmmaking that those movies would connect. His style is much smaller, and I don't think he needs to make movies that connect with awards. But look, I mean, the cast is phenomenal. I think people just want to work with him and Greta Gerwig. But I don't know if we need to consider this as an awards player. I think it's just going to be a really solid film that comes out next year. Netflix has so many great films above this at this point that I just can't. Knowing so little about it and believing what I believe about Noah Baumbach just being a one-off for the Oscars, maybe it should be higher than 57, but I don't buy it. I don't buy it. So that's why it's low here. 58, Train Dreams, directed by Clint Bentley. This is a Sundance premiere, and the real interesting part of this is it's written by Greg Quaidar of Sing Sing. So it could be a potential Sundance breakout, but we're really getting down there when we're considering Greg Quaidar being a screenwriter on it as like a real potential reason for this to be a Best Picture movie. 59, Pressure. This stars Andrew Scott and Brendan Fraser. It's based on a play. The play focuses on the day before D-Day as a meteorologist must deliver a weather report to Dwight Eisenhower just hours before everyone will head off to the French coast and potentially be slaughtered by Nazi forces. It's undeniable the performances in this are going to be phenomenal, but it's also going to be very stagey. It's 2 characters in a room. I don't think this is going to be able to break out of its stage origins, although I am quite excited to see what Andrew Scott and Brendan Fraser do in these roles. Number 60 is Growth by Armando Iannucci, and this one follows a ruthless CEO of a Snapchat-esque startup who pursues growth at any cost. Now, I don't know if this one's going to be finished this year, but Armando Iannucci, I think he's going to have his moment some year. Death of Stalin brought him pretty close. At some point, Armando Iannucci is going to be an awards player. Don't know if it's for this one, but at some point he will. He's such a great writer. In the Loop is so funny. Veep is so funny. Death of Stalin is so funny. Personal History of David Copperfield was not my cup of tea, but that's fine. That's whatever. This one I don't think will be finished on time, though. I think this is going to end up being a 2026 movie, but still on my list because we are not leaving any stones unturned. We are about halfway through the list, but we're going to speed up a little bit because we don't have all day. I want to get this video edited and to you guys, so we're not going to talk that much about everything. So at this point, we'll talk about the ones that interest me and that I have stuff to say about. So 61, The Rivals of Amaziah King. This is directed by Andrew Patterson, who did The Vast of Night. Such a great indie debut film, and I'm just so excited for whatever he does next, and I could see this being like an indie spirit movie or something that performs shockingly well at film festivals or something like that. 62, we have 28 Years Later, Danny Boyle's new zombie movie. Look, I mean, I think the trailer is one of the best we've gotten this year. It looks fantastic, but this is going to be far too horror-y for the Academy. It's not The Substance. It's not Get Out. This is not going to be a film that breaks through that horror mold. It's a zombie movie. We're not going to see this at the Oscars. 63, on the other hand, is Alpha, directed by Julia Ducournau for Neon. And I like the premise of this one. A young girl gets bullied by her classmates when rumors spread that she has an infectious disease. Kind of going into that body horror territory a little bit, some of that coming of age stuff. Look, coming off of Titan, you have to wonder if that film could have connected with the Academy in a post-Substance world. Julia Ducournau, if this film hits the right way, maybe we could have The Substance Part 2 coming up. If suddenly the Academy is more open to horror, maybe Alpha could do something. Number 64, Monsanto. It's the new film by John Lee Hancock, the director of The Founder, of The Blind Side. He's doing this for Netflix. It's a story about a class action lawsuit against pesticides. I don't think that John Lee Hancock is a filmmaker that's really fitting the Academy's sensibilities nowadays, but if this film's topical enough, it could be the right kind of crowd pleaser to get in, but I feel like it's a big ask, and it's not the type of movie that makes it anymore. 65, Die My Love. This is the new Lynn Ramsey film, and Lynn Ramsey is a filmmaker like Kelly Reichardt, who I think is one of the greats, but she needs the right movie to succeed because her style is so alienating and so cold. Die My Love does not sound like the right premise. It's too small. It's not topical enough. It's a film about a woman going insane, basically, alone in a cabin. That's not the right movie for someone with Lynn Ramsey's style. Honestly, she got close with We Need to Talk About Kevin. She needs another film that's as topical as that in order to get in. The thing I always say about elevated Oscar bait, you need a story that would typically resonate with Oscar voters with a filmmaker who does something more. And Lynn Ramsey needs something like The Zone of Interest, like Nickel Boys, something that typically is a story the Oscars would go for that her style can elevate, can bring up a level. Die My Love does not sound like that. 66, the drama, the new film by Christopher Borgli. This is interesting just because he just came off of Dream Scenario, but I'm not getting that this is going to be a big hit with the Academy when Dream Scenario wasn't. 67, The Chronology of Water, the directorial debut of Kristen Stewart, which tells the story of a woman escaping an abusive household through learning to become a competitive swimmer and then ending up in the world of BDSM, a very well-reviewed book to adapt. So this could be an acting player, but I'm not going to go much further than that at this point, especially for the debut of a performer like Kristen Stewart. 68 is Superman, James Gunn's new movie. I mean, it's Superman. The trailer's gotten really good reviews. Gunn has been highly, highly acclaimed for his Guardians movies. This could end up being a tech contender. It could get some PGA love. And maybe taking on a more iconic hero than the Guardians could get him a little bit more attention, a little bit more acclaim even. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a breakthrough moment for him. But I really think it's just like sound, VFX, and maybe like PGA at the max for this one. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, if he really revitalizes the superhero genre, then bam, maybe James Gunn is back in the race or something. But I'm not counting on that. 69, Eddington, Ari Aster's new movie, which is reportedly a Trump allegory Western following a small-town sheriff with big ambitions. He's pivoting away from horror. He's doing something that sounds like a dark comedy, a satire. But the Trump allegory of it sounds like something that people might be tired of at this point. You know, I was saying the same thing with the Battle of Bacton Cross earlier. And speaking of the Battle of Bacton Cross, PTA is making a very similar sounding movie with that one to Eddington. And, you know, I don't think that they're going to do two films that similar or that two films are going to succeed. And I feel like both of them might have a similar fate with box office where they're just kind of not performing as well as they need to for their budgets. Now, at number 70, we have Justin Lin's film Last Days. This has a Sundance premiere, and it follows the story of a missionary who attempts to reach the tribe living on North Sentinel Island who have never been contacted. And it is a true story where a missionary attempted to land on this island, and the indigenous people did kill him. It's interesting that Justin Lin is doing this. He's a fantastic action director who has really done a great job with the Fast and Furious series, and he's stepping away from that genre to make a more serious film, a drama about religious colonialism. And it not having a distributor makes me a little bit worried that, you know, why did studios pass on this one? Why did studios pass on this filmmaker who has made hundreds of millions of dollars for the studios? Why pass on that? Now from here, we're going to go real quick through these. So 71, Crime 101, directed by Bart Layton for Amazon. He directed American Animals, which was a fantastic crime movie a few years ago. 72 is Power Ballad, the new John Carney movie coming from Lionsgate. He directed Once, Begin Again, Sing Street, Flora and Son. This is really something worth taking note of for the song category. 73 is Tony, directed by Matt Johnson for A24. This one, I don't know if they've shot yet. I'm not sure if this one has filmed, but I do know that Matt Johnson was deep in pre-production for this film this fall, so I'm sure they're shooting, if not already, they're shooting very soon. Matt Johnson is the filmmaker behind Blackberry, the filmmaker behind Nirvana the Band, The Show, so he's someone that I think is really worth watching out for. This could be a paycheck movie, but part of me feels like he wouldn't make something that he doesn't have an angle on. He's a really fascinating guy and a really fun, distinct voice. And of course, this is the Anthony Bourdain biopic from A24. 74 is Peter Hujar's Day. This is Ira Sachs' new movie premiering at Sundance, and it's most of the team of Passages is returning. But this one sounds like a very small, very contained drama, mostly a conversation between an artist and, I believe, a journalist. So this one could be very interesting, but it sounds too cerebral. Doesn't sound like an Oscar movie in that way. 75 is Eternity, coming from A24 by David Frayne. This is a filmmaker who hasn't done much in the past. It's kind of a early career project, but it's got a really interesting concept to it about a world in which when you die, you have 7 days to pick where you'd like to spend the rest of eternity. And so it's a philosophical question at the center of it. Sounds a little bit like the film 9 Days, which I adored. 76 is Wizards, directed by David Michaud. It is a stoner comedy coming from A24, and what really interests me about this is the producer. Dee Gardner is producing this one for Plan B, and that's just interesting to me. I think Dee Gardner is one of the best producers out there, and she has a great eye for projects. So it's possible this one could be more worth taking note of than a stoner comedy might warrant. We've got Late Fame at 77, directed by Kent Jones, the director of the film Diane a few years ago. And interesting thing here is Sammy Birch wrote this. She did May December. This is her follow-up screenplay, so maybe worth paying attention to because of Sammy Birch. 78, we've got The Fishing Place, directed by Rob Tregenza. Rob Tregenza is an artist with a very renowned career, but not many films that have been very famous or highly seen, even within the art house community. That said, he was the cinematographer on Werckmeister Harmonies, and this is a World War II film set in Europe. Not only do I think this is going to look beautiful, but it has elements to it that are reading as elevated Oscar bait. You've got this really fascinating experimental artist who is doing something in the confines of World War II and the Holocaust. Could be the zone of interest, or it could just be nothing whatsoever. But I think it's worth paying attention to, because if this shows up in Cannes competition, then maybe, just maybe, it's a big deal. At number 80, we've got Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, Jim Jarmusch's new movie being distributed by Mubi. And look, Jim Jarmusch, one of our greatest filmmakers, I don't think he will ever make an Oscar movie unless he makes something that is distinctly elevated Oscar bait, something that feels undeniable for Oscars by any other filmmaker. But Jim Jarmusch is not interested in awards, and I don't think that this will be the one that does it for him. Next up, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, Kogonada. He did Columbus, he did After Yang. This one's not reading to me as like needs to be a big player, but hey, maybe I'm wrong about that. Honey Don't. This is Ethan Coen's new movie from Focus. It is the second in a trilogy with Drive Away Dolls, and we saw what Drive Away Dolls was. It's a goofy comedy, super campy. Honey Don't is going to be much of the same. 83, Anemone, directed by Ronan Day-Lewis, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. He's coming back to star in his son's movie, which is really sweet, very inspiring, and I mean, I'm always excited for Daniel Day-Lewis to be in anything, but look, I don't have any reason to believe this is going to be anything more than like a family project. 84, Splitsville, which is Neon's new film directed by Michelangelo Covino, who directed one of my favorite movies of 2020 called The Climb, which was a beautiful comedy about friendship and bonds and betrayal. Super funny movie. I don't think it's going to be an Oscar player, but maybe for Indie Awards. 85, we have The Actor, Duke Johnson's film for Neon, starring Andre Holland. And look, there's just so many red flags about this one. You could have this much higher. In fact, I have had it much higher on previous years, but they've been working on this one for years and years and years. There was production issues. There were problems all along the way. Every year we hear it's done, and it's just not. And we don't have an excuse like Terrence Malick takes forever to finish projects because he's a perfectionist. There is no feasible reason why this should be taking as long as it's taking to get done. And I just feel like the red flags are all over the place for this one. I don't think this is going to be much of anything, but it's on the list because it could be, and we've had high hopes for it in the past. 86 is The Collaboration, the film about the meeting of Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat. Jeremy Pope, Paul Bettany, they're great actors, but nothing about this is feeling like it's going to hit. 88, we have I Want Your Sex, Greg Araki's new film. I love Greg Araki. I mean, Mysterious Skin, one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't know if Greg Araki has it anymore, has the sauce. So I don't know if I can count on this one being an awards contender at this point. 89, Sinners, Ryan Coogler's new movie. Trailer? Stunning. Looks beautiful, no notes, but it's a vampire movie and it's coming out in March. If it was a big player, I think Warner Brothers would be putting it later in the year, so I'm not expecting big things from this one. Really excited for Wildwood, which is my 94 pick. This is a stop-motion animation movie coming from Laika Studios. Laika, one of the best in the game, Cannot wait for this one. Number 96 is Rosebush Pruning. This is Karim Aynuz's new film from Mubi, and it is a remake of Marco Bellocchio's film Fists in the Pocket, a 1960s film about a psychopath who basically convinces his family that it's in their best interest if they all kill themselves. This could be really interesting and could be a foreign language film contender for Brazil. Number 98 is Warfare, the new Alex Garland film. And I'm not thinking this is a big Oscar contender, but I do think we have to consider this for sound. We have to consider this for visual effects, especially knowing that Civil War just got shortlisted for visual effects. This one seems like a bigger action movie, and we could definitely see it pop into those conversations later on in the year. Number 99, Flowervale Street. Interesting, from Warner Brothers, directed by David Robert Mitchell of It Follows and Under the Silver Lake. I think this is a Cloverfield movie. Don't ask me why. I think this is a Cloverfield movie. Number 101, another Brazilian film, The Secret Agent, directed by Kleber Mendonça Filho, the director of Bacurau, one of my favorite Brazilian films. So The Secret Agent is one that could pop up at Cannes, could be an international feature contender. I'm really excited for this one. I think Brazilian cinema is having a moment, and Kleber Mendonça Filho is one of my favorite filmmakers coming out of that region. Number 103, another film that I'm really excited for, is Resurrection, Bigan's new film. Now, Bigan is one of the greatest filmmakers working today. He is such an interesting formalist filmmaker. If you haven't seen his film Long Day's Journey into Night, you got to see it. You got to check it out. Fantastic. Never seen anything like it before. I think this is a big prize contender at the Cannes Film Festival this year. Moving on down the list, number 114 here, The Magnificent Life of Marcel Pagnol, which is a Sony Pictures Classics film directed by Sylvain Chomet. This is another animated film, director of The Triplets of Belleville and The Illusionist, and of course the animated opening of Joker Folie à Deux. So this one is a biopic of a filmmaker, and I just think it's going to be a really interesting project. It's on my list because I think it's an animated feature player, and honestly, if the Academy is shifting, we could see this be a winner. Number 117 is Long Day's Journey into Night, which stars Jessica Lange. We don't know if this movie's ever going to be released. Jessica Lange has even said, "I shot that years ago. Where is it? I don't know. I have no updates on this one." So maybe it comes out and we get a Jessica Lange nomination, or maybe they've just fully scrapped it at this point. 118 is The Twilight World, an animated film directed by Werner Herzog. Fascinating. It tells the story of Anoda, notable for being the last Japanese soldier fighting in the Philippines. It's a really interesting story, and Werner Herzog has never done an animated movie before. I can't wait to see this. I think it's going to be a really interesting film. Again, not a Best Picture player, but hey, we're here. Now, 120, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. We have to consider Marvel movies for visual effects, for sound. And when I look at Marvel's slate this year, which includes Fantastic Four, which includes Captain America: Brave New World, and which includes Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four is the only one that's standing out to me as like, that could be a contender in some way, shape, or form. We could see this be a score contender. We could see it get production design, especially because they're doing like a retro aesthetic for it. But really what I'm considering for this one is visual effects. Visual effects, this is the one of those three Marvel movies. I think this is going to be a big one. We also have to consider that this is setting up their Doom series of the Avengers. So we know that this is going to tie in more to their stuff than other films have. So if any of their movies this year is a contender for any Oscars, it's Fantastic Four. In the blink of an eye, Andrew Stanton's new film coming from Searchlight. Andrew Stanton, of course, the filmmaker behind WALL-E and Finding Nemo. And this one is apparently going straight to Disney+, but I hope not, because the script is quite good. I've read it. I think it's going to be a beautiful movie, and I'd be really sad to see it relegated to Disney+, but that said, that's where it's leaning at the moment. And if it is on Disney+, then I can't predict it for anything. And then most of the other films in this range are just tech contenders. Stuff like Wolfman, How to Train Your Dragon, The The Electric State, Snow White, films that I think are nothing, but I just have to list anyways. But the last film I'll leave you with here as one that I'm really interested in is an Italian film called Heads or Tails. Heads or Tails is telling the story of Buffalo Bill, who is running a Wild West show that really popularized the myth of the West in Europe. John C. Reilly is playing Buffalo Bill, and it's sort of about this cowboy's interactions with Italians, and I think likely about the inspiration of the spaghetti western genre. Anyways, I just sped through that last 50 films and didn't talk about most of them. You can go through the list. Any of the films that you are interested in learning more about, Google them. I feel like this is going to be one of the best years we've ever had for films, and I can't wait to get to it. But before we get to all of that, we're going to be returning to this year's Oscar season. We're not going to focus on next year until we get a little bit further in. But thank you so much for watching. This has been a great second year of talking about all of next year's contenders, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. Now, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and as always, my name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.